Hello and good afternoon. This is a lesson to discuss Eysenck's theory of criminal personality. This is part of the forensic psychology unit. You can follow this with your course books or along with the handouts that we used in class on the last lesson. So, Eysenck's personality theory essentially is quite unusual because it has a biological basis. This makes it quite unusual from other personality theories. Eysenck believes that criminals and non-criminals differ on the basis of their personality. And we need to state at the start that Eysenck's theory is a trait theory of personality, implying that personality is fixed. There are lots of other theories in psychology which do not believe that personality is fixed. So, 1970, Eysenck created his theory based on biological factors. And in this theory, he believed that people inherit a type of nervous system which then goes on to affect how they interact with the environment and ultimately their personality. So, Eysenck believes that people, when it says inherit a nervous system, it essentially means that they are born with a type of nervous system. So this could be they are born with high levels of testosterone. It could be that they are born with an overactive nervous system or an underactive nervous system. And this type of nervous system leads to the development of certain personality characteristics. He also believes that humans are essentially hedonistic. Hedonistic means look for pleasure, pleasure seeking. And the idea of this being that humans are always looking to feel better. So if somebody has an underactive nervous system, they would want to do things that provided thrill seeking, sensation seeking for them, risk taking behaviours. This is just one example. So humans look for what they need to make themselves feel good. This is the basis of personality according to Eysenck. Eysenck therefore believes, because it's a biological theory, that we need to focus on the interaction between genes and environment. You could therefore argue that this is an interactionist theory. It firstly considers genes because it's based in biology, and it considers the environment because it considers how you adapt and interact in your environment. He then explains 3 dimensions to personality. In his original theory, he developed the idea of extroversion versus introversion and neuroticism versus stability. And when looking at the criminal personality, he brought in the 3rd dimension of psychoticism. Make sure that you are able to describe these 3 dimensions of personality. So these are some of the traits that are associated with the different types of personality. As you can see over here, someone who scores high on neurotic and high on extroversion is more likely to be aggressive, excitable and impulsive. According to Eysenck, these people are more likely to engage in criminal behaviour. Therefore, part of the criminal personality are people who score high on neuroticism and high on extroversion. In addition to this, they also score high on psychoticism. Here are some of the traits of each personality. So, for example, if we have a look at psychoticism, there are some traits that we might link with a lot of serial killers, such as being unsympathetic, manipulative, very dogmatic, and very tough-minded. If you're asked in the exam to identify a personality characteristic, you could use any of the ones on this page to explain criminal behaviour. So one of the questions that you were asked in intervention this week was to discuss one of Eysenck's personality traits and explain how it was involved in criminal behaviour. So you could, for example, take risk-taking behaviour. You could then talk about how this was part of one of the dimensions, which was extroversion. You don't have to know all of these, but just make sure that you can give an example of each of the different dimensions of personality. Remember that these are fixed, so somebody who is extroverted will be extroverted in every situation according to Eysenck, and somebody who is neurotic will always be neurotic. So we now need to look at where this actually comes from, and this is digging a little bit deeper into the biological basis of psychotic behaviour. And again, remember that this comes from our biology. It's the nervous system that we are born with, which dictates our later behaviour. Again, showing a complete interaction between environment and biology. So, people who are extrovert have an underactive or under-aroused nervous system. Therefore, they thrive on external stimulation. They will be thrill pleasure-seeking. They are people who will be risk-taking. Someone who is neurotic or high on the neurotic scale, we're very anxious about new situations. It's somebody who has a completely over-aroused nervous system, and therefore they will look for ways to calm themselves down. They might be quite picky about the way they are, quite pedantic. Psychotic behaviour is associated with too much testosterone. I should mention, when I say psychotic, I mean psychotic traits, psychoticism, traits such as aggressiveness, coldness, being dogmatic. So these are all features of someone who is classed as having psychotic traits. Again, they are all rooted in biology. So, of them all, extroverts are arguably the most likely to commit a crime. Why would this be? Well, Eysenck believes that this is probably because they need lots of stimulation. They require lots of sensations in order to feel fulfilled, and therefore they are more likely to engage in risk-taking behaviour. Unfortunately, they do not condition well, so they do not take to rules very well, and they always want to do their own thing. However, the problem with this is that there is very little supporting research to back this up. So again, just extending the bit on extroversion. Eysenck claims that criminals are extrovert because they gain arousal from crime. This does not mean sexual arousal. This means arousal of the nervous system. They get a buzz from doing it. And that's why Zuckerman states that an extrovert type is essentially sensation-seeking. However, he does go on to say that there is no relationship between people who are sensation-seeking, i.e. like driving fast cars or going on roller coasters, and people who are criminal. And adding to this, Smith states that extroverts are simply people who are easily aroused. Again, not talking sexually, referring to the sensation-seeking, the thrill-seeking idea. So we have some evidence here, or comments here, to suggest that Eysenck's claims are not actually correct. And of course we have the problem that not everybody with extrovert traits will become a criminal. There are issues with individual differences. There'll be lots of people with extrovert traits and lots of people who engage in sensation-seeking behaviours who don't become criminals. So we need to take this into account. The next dimension that I'm going to focus on is psychoticism. And this is probably the one that we know the least about, but that is the easiest of the three aspects to relate to crime. And that's because there is a well-documented relationship between crime and impulsivity, rule-breaking, aggression. So it's quite easy to see where this element has come from. Again though, please note there is only a relationship, there is no cause and effect. People who have psychotic traits, there's no guarantee that they will become a criminal. What you need to make sure now is that you have some research to support this. The two pieces of research that I recommended in the lesson were to focus on Eysenck and Farrington. They are in your course notes. Make sure that you can state what this suggests about the idea of a criminal personality. Does the criminal personality actually exist? Or is it based largely on interviews? How effective is the measuring tool that is used to measure personality? Again, think about what conclusions you can draw from the research about this explanation of crime. Certainly one of the strengths of the explanation is that it is an interactionist approach that considers both the nature and the nurture side of the debate. And therefore we're bringing in one of the major debates in psychology here, if you can bring in the fact that this theory does take into consideration both sides, but be sure to explain why and how it takes into consideration both sides. It would not be seen as effective evaluation to just simply say that it accounts for both of them. We so far looked at two biological theories, genetics and neural. And one of the problems with these two was that it downplayed the importance of the environment. And this is, to an extent, biological theory, but this time it does consider the role of the environment, again strengthening the theory. One of the main problems with the theory is the issue with cause and effect. This happens with a lot of theories, particularly related to crime. And that's because we cannot say that one factor causes another. So we cannot say that having a particular personality will lead to you becoming a criminal. In the same respect, we cannot say that being a criminal leads you to have a certain type of personality. So in other words, we have a problem with causation. We do not know what has caused what and in what order. And therefore that limits the theory. Another issue with the theory is that most of the evidence comes from the criminal populations. Very few control groups are used of people who do not have criminal traits. And most of the people who are interviewed are criminals. So again, this reduces the population validity, again reducing the validity of the overall theory. The most effective way to study criminal behaviour would be to use a longitudinal study where you could look at criminals over time and see development. Again, there is very little research on anything longitudinal, so it's very difficult for us to conclude about the changing nature of personality over time and to find out whether we can even use this theory to be predictive. One of the other issues with Eysenck's theory is, can it be equally applied to all types of crime? And if not, is that an issue? So we can certainly see how psychoticism can potentially apply to a range of serial murders, but does it apply to drug use? Does it apply to arson? Do arsonists and drug users have the same traits? And I would argue not, because essentially this is failing to account for individual differences, and it's also failing to account for the vast differences in upbringing. Again, this is something that we need to consider here, and also the idea of the role of free will. People do have a choice as to whether they commit a crime or not, and a personality theory would imply that this is completely deterministic and that they are not able to choose whether to commit the crime or not. You should be able to find this example in your textbook, but here is an applied question that you could have a look at to try to further your knowledge on this. Again, personality is a topic that could be quite tricky because it is interactionist. Please ensure that you have a full set of notes on this. Here are some stretch and challenge questions. You could also get applied questions on this, and it is possible that you could have a 16-mark question. However, it's possible that you could be asked about several explanations rather than just one. This ends the session on the criminal personality.